Hi, I'm Raphael Heath, Head of Geography at the Royal High School, Bath, and this is the fourth of my tutorials relating to the Geography World Record event that we've been developing for November the 19th, 2014. And I've talked so far about basics of putting in data, changing symbols, and actually adding secondary data. I'm going to talk a little bit more about skills you can do, actually in this case only if you're a subscriber to ArcGIS Online, which I believe is £100 plus VAT for UK schools, so it's really very good value for money, and you get some extra functionality which you can use with the GIS tools beyond the ones I've shown so far. So this one's going to show you data interpolation, how that works, and how you can use it with the data collected by students in this event. So if I just go to website arcgis.com, and before I've shown you just sort of searching for the map, but this time you'd need to sign in and you'd need to have an account. You can create a free account for 30 days, I believe, as a trial and test to see the functionality, and as I said, as a school you can subscribe as well, because contact the Esri UK Schools programme. So you would sign in, and once you've signed in, you would then search for the map, the GIS World Record map, as before, once you've signed in, and then open it, and you'd have different rights when you're signed in. I've already done this here, so I've opened the map as signed in as myself. You can see I've signed in because it has me up here, which it wouldn't be if you just used the free sort of public account without logging in. So we've got the GIS, some example GIS data here, just some imaginary data for Bath. So these dots represent different students who've put in data, or just fake data for the moment to play around with, scattered across Bath. When this exercise is done, we should have thousands of students across regions, countries, perhaps even across the world, entering dots of data. So what you can do with the subscription are a few more tools. If you go down here, I've shown before about the idea of changing symbols. If you go down a little bit further on this list, there's something called perform analysis as well. I might mention something else before I do this. Also, we've got filter down here as well. I believe you can do that without signing in, but it's a useful tool to be aware of, where you can filter data so that the dots that are shown on the map are only certain amounts of data. This could be quite useful if you only want to analyse, let's say, your own students' or schools' data, because if you go onto this first box, it shows you the different fields that are there, so you can pick school name, and then you could have different commands for what you sort of are looking for, things that contain certain letters or is entirely something. So I might have Royal High School, and that means that only the dots, the fields, the values, sorry, that have the Royal High School Bath typed into this school name will actually appear. Everything else will go. That can be quite useful if you want to sort of narrow down the data, especially when there's sort of thousands of dots on the map and it's getting clustered and crowded and you only want to look at one thing. And also when you want to do this analysis I'm talking about, and you don't want to necessarily analyse everyone's data. You may well want to analyse everyone's data, but you may want to filter it for some reason to reduce the data set down a bit. Anyway, that's a bit about filtering. I'm now going to talk about the performing analysis, which you can see is about 3/4 of the way down the list here. And this is only for subscribers to ArcGIS Online. All kinds of analysis tools which you really open up the power and excitement of GIS analysis, do loads of really interesting things you can do depending on your investigation and what you're trying to do. I'll do another tutorial on data enrichment because that relates to this task. That's quite an interesting one. And proximity, you can do buffers and nearest neighbour and nearest distance things, so I could have 50 metre, 100 metre buffers here, or drive times from each of these dots and so on. Again, useful for other types of investigation depending on the data I'm collecting. But this particular one I'm looking at the analysing patterns. We can calculate density, which is just the clustering of the dots themselves, so we could see where more data has been collected. In other words, more students have added data in. You can kind of, to some extent, see that visually anyway by the dots. Hotspots and interpolating points. I'm going to talk about interpolating points. We can do hotspots on the data as well, but interpolating points is visually quite pleasing. So it then asks you, once you select it, what do you want to interpolate, and this is essentially making isoline maps out of the data. And so I've got all my fields here, so I could pick the how do you rate your quality of light, how do you rate your area overall, how noisy is it, and so on, and create maps based on them. So if I pick the one about crime, let's say, how much crime do you think occurs in your area? A few adjustments I can make here. I'll just leave it as it is by default. Under the options here, again, you could play around with these to narrow down certain regions or areas and number of classes, but I'm going to leave them as they are. In most cases, that's fine for what we're doing. But I do need to give the layer a name. Obviously, as a scriber, having logged in, I've now got a sort of a file cloud management system for my maps, so that's why you need to scribe to be able to do this. So I might say student crime perception. I'll just call it test because I know this is just a practice map. Don't want to confuse it, and I've got all my folders for where I've already saved maps. You can see I've got lots of folders and lots of maps I've created. I'll put this in my test folder not to clutter everything else out. And you can see this little tick here is very important. It says use current map extent. If I just go to this show credits, when you do this type of analysis, it takes up credits on your account. This has got 21 dots in and it uses 0.021 credits, hardly anything. So it's not going to necessarily be that hungry on credits, but obviously if you've got 1,000 dots, it will consume more. So it's just something to be aware of. With the subscription, I think you get 1,000 credits as a school to start with. So you're probably not going to use them up, and you can buy more if you need to. But this use current map extent means that if I don't tick it, then it will analyse every dot. So if I've got, let's say, all the world record data here, and it's tens of thousands of dots, let's say, then it will sort of take a long time to analyse. It will crunch all the data and create a huge map, which we probably don't want to do. And I'm not even sure if it would be successful on such a large data set. I've never tried it on huge data sets. But anyway, use current map extent means just what I've zoomed into. So if I zoom in closer, it will only include, this handful of dots, 3 or 4 dots. I don't think it would work necessarily for very little data. If I zoom out further, it will obviously include everything I can see. So that's why I've kind of just zoomed into this particular extent where the dots I have are. So that's just something to be aware of. And then I'm happy with that. I click the Run Analysis button here, and you'll see this little whirling circle here, which tells me that it's sort of attempting to do the analysis for the data I've asked it for. So this has gone off to a server somewhere that Esri UK have, maybe even USA, I don't know. It's performing the analysis task, it's creating a new layer for me, and then when it's completed it, it will then show it on my map. So that's the idea. You can see this one's done. That's in real time. I didn't do anything there. Some days it's more successful than others, depending on the traffic. It can be heavier than others. Some days it might fail. Just have to try it again. It's a little bit temperamental, but you can see there it worked first time, worked perfectly. So what I have now is this rather sort of elegant, beautiful contour map showing me the data for the crime. The darker areas are the areas scoring higher values, 9 to 10 on the crime rankings. And obviously you've got the dots for the real data, but you've got the interpolation of the, sort of the areas between, looking at trends and patterns. So I can see this area of Bath, if I just get rid of it, this area down here, this sort of central area of Bath, a higher perception of crime. These areas here, lower perception of crime levels according to our student data, values of sort of 2 to 8 and so on in the values that they reported. If I just show you the actual real data, so this person up here, if I go to them, they said 2, for example, for the crimes question, which is this one down here. If I go to this person down here, they said scale of 1 to 9, they thought 10, sorry, they gave it 9 for crime. So that's what the real data looked like, and I showed in other tutorials how you might visualize those dots into different circles or colors, but this is just another way of creating sort of a pattern for some of the data. And interpolating the data in between where those dots are. Obviously, if this works best, I mean, this is imaginary data, and I did put in the data relatively randomly, but with a mind to create a pattern. If the data is very scattered and there is no pattern at all, then this map won't really look very pleasing at all. It will look very sort of random and spotty. So it does work best when there are clear sort of trends and patterns which it can then work on and create this kind of contour map from. But that's the idea of this this type of more advanced analysis. And then, as I said before, you can bring in some of the secondary data to your maps as well, and compare the dots and the interpolation with things like the census data, deprivation data, and so on, to make the the map more useful. So I hope you found that interesting. This is just sort of an overview of one of the analysis tools. There are others that can be used. I'll create some other tutorials about them. But that's just a sort of introduction to data interpolation, which can be used for all kinds of things, but in the context of this World Record event, which I hope we get as many students involved across the UK and perhaps internationally as well, involved in participating with. Thank you very much. My name is Raphael Heath, Head of Geography from the Royal High School.